to your question, Brian, I was not in the Navy. I was not in, any kind of military service, but I was in the service of a large corporation that flew me all over the world to just about every, I think, 65 countries or something crazy like that. And so when you said Diego Garcia, my antenna went up, because of course I've heard of it. We've flown over it, and near it, and it's kind of this place. I write fiction. It's one of these places I've always kind of wished I could go, but of course it's not, a tourist destination or anything like that. But so yeah, so a lot of where you've talked about, besides living overseas for over a decade, was just very much of an education for me. I think even just hearing your stories about Wales, that it is truly, and I never, besides not knowing it, what the distinction between the regions when I was a young person. It's really one of the most surprisingly beautiful places I'd ever been. I think that I expected Wales to be like Iowa or something. Like, not that Iowa isn't beautiful, it's just I was expecting it to be rolling hills and farmland and things like that, but I was not expecting the mountains, and especially the Brecon Hills and things like that I was able to see. So if I understand correctly, you're living now in St. Petersburg, Tampa area?
Tampa, Southeast Tampa. Yeah, in Southeast Hillsborough County. Yeah.
Okay. How do you enjoy your retired or rewired, or you're doing so? Okay. How are you enjoying that, and what's kind of next on your agenda of things you want to do?
I retired 5 years ago with Brian at Rapid PayCard. It was a complete change of career direction for me. I'd worked in the health and fitness fields. I worked professionally in sport for the sport of rugby back in England for 5 years. Learned a lot about the game, learned a lot about coaching. In fact, I took a lot of things from coaching people. Primarily, I was what's known as a youth development officer. So I was coaching under 21s down, and I was training, parents to become coaches and everything at a very basic level, of course. Came in very useful when I was with Rapid PayCard, because, as I said, Bill, it was a complete change of career direction, working in the finance industry, but into the time at Rapid PayCard was when I was coaching young players, even grown-up players, adult players. I would say, look, the referee is not always right, but they're always the referee. And so, even when we had new people join our training department at Rapid PayCard, I wasn't involved, primarily in all the training, but I'd always pass on a little tip, and I'd say, look, the customer's not always right, but they're always the customer. Right. It's a good philosophy, because guess what, folks? They're not always right, and we're not always right. Yeah. Another thing that I used to tell my players is, when you think about it, do you want to improve? Do you want to improve? It's all about getting better, and getting better never ends. That process, think about it, getting better never ends. And so, when I started with Rapid, there was just me, Brian, Chris, and Virna, and that was it. And then, as we grew, it wasn't a shock to have such a change of direction in my career. It was a pleasant change, if you really want to be honest, because especially in the health and fitness industry, I was an district operations manager for Central Florida for a very famous chain of health clubs. The health and fitness industry can be a very fickle industry. Some members can be members of your club can be very, very, very demanding. In fact, overkill. I'll give you a very quick example. I opened up one of their absolutely spectacular facilities in Orlando one time. This was back in the early 2000s. The club hadn't been open 6 weeks, and this was a state-of-the-art health and fitness club. Absolutely beautiful, great equipment. I'm stood at the front desk one day training one of our receptionists, and this lady comes out of the locker room mid-morning, about 10:30, 10:45 in the morning, obviously a retired lady. She'd had a workout. Her hair was wet. She'd been in the shower. Great, great. She comes up to the desk and I said, oh, how can I help you, ma'am? Straight away, she says, your locker rooms are disgusting. And I said, I'm very sorry about that. I'll if you can tell me what the issue is, I'll get someone, one of my female members of staff to go in and take care of it for you right away. This is what she said. I found a Q-tip on the floor. I'm not kidding you guys. I found a Q-tip on the floor. Now, at the time, I felt like saying, did you pick it up and put it in the trash? But you can't do that.
Right.
But that's just one example, And so one of the advantages that I found of working at Rapid was it was very seldom face-to-face, in person with the customers. It was like this, which was great. I made mistakes. Absolutely, I made mistakes. Did I learn from those mistakes? Yeah, because if you make a mistake and don't learn from it, you've just made another bloody mistake. Right. So
Brian, Sam helped us significantly because I'm going to call it the Tom Jones effect. Is that the payroll staff across the United States is predominantly female, and there would be plenty of people I would travel the country and they go, oh, Sam, I just love when I talk to Sam, and it'd be that voice, and it would be just like, well, that's great. I think so. There were times that I know for a fact there was one company, I won't say it, but we still can't win them today. But Sam kept them on board when they should have fired us. But the women just loved Mr. Silk voice.
Well, I don't know if you remember, Brian, but it was probably a good time after, you took me on. I'm going maybe 2 or 3 years. You and I were just chit-chatting in the office one day, and you turned around to me and you said, one of the reasons I hired you was your accent. You were very honest about it. And I said, okay, yeah.
Sam,
because
we missed a significant step here.
Yeah.
The rapid days were fun, but I don't know what caused you to move from wherever you lived in Europe post leaving the Navy, decide I'm going to go live in America. Obviously now I know a little background that you'd seen Texas and you'd been to Florida a few times.
Yeah.
But what was there some obstacle you overcame, or was there
my first wife was American.
Another connection we have, Sam. We both have first wives.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm lucky with Debbie now. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, just wonderful.
Married on the beach.
You got married and moved to America. Is that what happened?
Brian came. But yeah, how did I transition from sporting into Rapid? That's another good question. I came to an agreement with the fitness company I was working for in Orlando. We came to an agreement and a disagreement on a few things, and so we decided to part company in Orlando. I was kind of glad in a way, but at the same time, I found myself out of work, and the snag was I was tied to my apartment in Orlando for another 3 months, so I had no choice. I had to stay in Orlando, and I had an association with the local rugby team here in St. Petersburg called the Pelicans. And one of the members of the Pelicans, who was very friendly with Chris Ruppel, posted on the Pelican rugby page about a job. And the guy who posted was George LaBanca. So I've obviously, got to be eternally grateful for George for posting that. I looked at the post and I went, that sounds interesting. So I sent off my resume and sent off the information, and I called the office. And Virna answered the phone and told me what to do. I sent it off, and Brian called me for an interview. I drove down from Orlando, went for the interview. Wasn't entirely sure how it went at the time. I felt pretty comfortable about it. I won't say confident, but I felt pretty comfortable. And then I think it was just a matter of 3 or 4 days later, Brian called me and offered me the job. And I said, yep, that'll do me, and within gosh, within less than 6 months of being with them, I turned around to them both and I said, I want this job to take me into retirement, because it was such a breath of fresh air from what I'd been doing in the past. Complete change. And in a way, it was right up my street, because being an instructor and teaching, at the time, though, I was selling the program as well. And then I transitioned, just into training, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved it, to be honest with you. Yeah. As I said, I made mistakes, and Brian and I, Chris and I, we had our disagreements. But that's human nature. If you can't talk openly with somebody about certain things, then there's no point in talking. But as I said, I wanted the job to take me into retirement. I told them both that, and 16 years later, that's exactly what it did. And I will be forever eternally grateful. You might have caught on something that Brian said a few minutes ago, gents, about the Navy being the best job. I always used to teach them. I'd always say, RAP is just the second best job I've had. It's certainly the best civilian job I've ever had.